Good evening from Vietnam. Thanks a lot for joining to our Inside Sharing Talk, and we really appreciate and really admire the works that you do. So it's our privilege to have you on the show and share your story with our audience. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And in our culture, I know that you yet been to Vietnam. So in our culture, it's very honest for our audience if we can have you to help us to do the introduction of who you are and the work that you do. Can you help us to do that?
Of course, of course. I have a pretty simple story. I was young and working for some large consulting firms in the States. I worked for Anderson, which is now called Accenture, and Ernst & Young, and very quickly figured out that I did not fit at all, and I wanted to do something else. I was fascinated by people and by business, and I decided to get a PhD and become a professor and study those things full time. So I went to Texas A&M University, got a PhD in organizational behavior, and then for 10 years I was a professor in the Midwest, teaching leadership-related courses, which I loved until the next phase presented itself, and I started speaking professionally and more than anything, I do a lot of work with LinkedIn and have, I don't know, 40 plus courses seen by millions of people in almost every country in the world. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay. Allow us to slowly learning about your story altogether. You've been travel the world and do a lot of speech and wrote the books, and your learning courses actually has a lot of people learn. A lot of them are also my friends sharing about that. So we're gonna bring you to the years ago when you were young. Vivian, she wanted to become a a singer when she was young, and then I wanted to become an astronaut, but neither of us become what we wanted. So when you were young, what did you envision that when you grow up, what kind of job you're gonna do, and what kind of contribution you're gonna contribute to the world, though?
I was talking to my children. I have two boys. They're 15 and 19. And I was talking to them about that recently. When I was 12, I wanted to grow up and be a professional wrestler.
Please play with show.
It's very, very embarrassing, but it's true. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a professional basketball player, but it just was nowhere near good enough. And then in college, I started dreaming about business and running, becoming an executive or running, creating and starting a small business for myself, which is and getting a PhD. That came a little later.
So why did you choose to study in organizational behavior back then and then go for the PhD degree on that, though?
I was very interested in applied psychology, why people do what they do. And I was thinking seriously at one point back then about marketing and why we make the decisions as consumers that we make, and why people at work function the way they function. So my observation when I was still had a real job back in the day at Anderson and Ernst & Young, my observation was that people found it difficult sometimes to be effective in relationships. We weren't great communicators, conflicts and tensions. There's a lot of people-related issues that explained performance problems. That just seemed so obvious to me that when I finally made the decision to go and get a PhD and be a professor for a while, I decided to go that route. Marketing is interesting, but I didn't feel great about just helping companies figure out how to sell more product. I really wanted leaders to build better teams. That was more inherently appealing to me.
And then for the 10 years in teaching, you decided to change course again so that you can have a greater influence. And what happened to that back then, though?
Well, I was a tenured senior professor at a great school called Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio. And I had a job for life. I had tenure. I had been a dean for a little while. And this side hustle turned into a real career. Well, the phone kept ringing. People kept wanting me to do things. And I started saying yes, 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 yes. And my calendar became busy. And it got so busy that I realized I couldn't do both things anymore. And I had to make a decision. Lynda.com, which later was purchased by LinkedIn, became a big part of that decision because a couple years before I let go of the professor role, they found me and we started making online educational courses. And of course, we haven't stopped ever since. So that gave me a new safety net, a new reason to feel better about trying to go solo as an entrepreneur.
Wow. And then, and my curious is over the years that you've been doing, you really focus on relationship and leadership authenticity, and you make yourself, one of the guru in the world, and the most well-known person in the world in this, areas of expertise. Why why is that so fascinating to you that keep you being, learning and being, expert on that?
No, it's a great question. I mean, again, it started back when I was working for Anderson Ernst and Young. What I noticed was that people go to work every day
Mm,
and they act like an actor,
mm,
which is funny because none of us were trained to be actors. But that's what we did. In organizational behavior, we would call it impression management. That is to
mm,
say, in social situations, we feel a pressure, sometimes a strong pressure, to behave a certain way, speak a certain way, look a certain way.
mm,
And we want to meet the expectations of people around us, our colleagues, our supervisor, our clients, etc. And so we shape how we present ourselves in a lot of ways.
mm,
That was obvious to me. I was naturally wired to see that easily, which is
mm.
wonderful. I got lucky. And studying it has been fascinating. So authenticity is a little more about who you are, about how you look, how you feel, your thoughts on the issues at work. Just filtering that a little less is the
Mm,
simple idea I carry for authenticity. And when people do it, they tend to feel better because they're not wasting energy managing impressions all the time. Of course, it does require like-minded people. Some people don't like authenticity. They like rigid structure and people who stay in their roles and never share opinions. And those workplaces are no fun to be at.
the whole notion of authenticity, the whole terms, been coined in, in business talks. I think it's in the past couple of years, about 5 6 years ago, and then you've been learning about that way longer before that. And how do you see that authenticity, has changed in the leadership space now, though?
Generally, changes that are needed happen slow, unfortunately, sometimes,
Mm.
but it is doing nothing but growing in importance. So it was probably 15 plus years ago. I wrote a book called Show Your Ink, which, yes, is a reference to these. And it was a simple statement about authenticity and being yourself.
Mm.
And it has really changed a lot of people. And many people say it differently than I do. I use the phrase show your ink. But there's many ways to say it. And there's a reason it's popular every year, maybe a little don't enjoy a lot of the, well, I'll say contrived or fake work relationships. If you think about it, and this will sound strange, but if you think about it, when you go to work, these are fully contrived relationships, meaning if you didn't have to have a job, you might not even be friends with those people or know that they exist.
Mm.
So by definition, we're getting to know people we otherwise wouldn't get to know. And being ourselves is difficult. People inherently understand the simple utility of this idea. That's why it keeps growing. I see it growing year over year.
Mm. And I'm just curious, why what keep us from being authenticity at the very beginning anyway?
Well, the psychology there is pretty clear. We're all born as humans with a lot of natural inborn anxieties, fears, and apprehensions. That's not good or bad per se.
Mm.
It's just true about us as a species. So we want to belong. We want to be safe. We want to be productive and add value. All of these things make us anxious to some degree. Now, we all vary by personality. We all vary in how much we experience those things. But with almost no exceptions, we all experience those things naturally. So
Mm.
it's a given that when we walk into new social situations or a new job, we will have some amount of apprehensions. Some people today are getting very honest, as I'm sure you're very well aware, about that reality, because some people, a minority of people, experience them in sometimes crippling ways, and it's a mental health issue. And
Mm.
thankfully, in the modern business world, we're getting better and better at openly discussing and addressing any kind of difficult mental health issues. That's a trend I'm very happy is happening.
Mm. So if if Vivid and I wanna, show our authenticity at work, and what are the baby steps you can advise to us so that we can, be, be more open and then be more authentic at what we do?
I love that question because I'm a troubadour for authenticity, but I'm also very honest. It's an imperfect concept like every other concept, and you have to be careful in application of any good idea. So here's my answer to your question. You have to put a toe in the water to test the temperature. Now, what I mean by piece suit, starchy shirt, conservative tie, well shaved, Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and then Monday you show up in sandals, jeans, unshaven, and a t-shirt. That's going to surprise people, shock people, and not going to serve you well. You put a toe in the water first by doing one or two small type things differently than you usually do them to make people have a chance to react, frankly. So maybe you don't wear a suit coat whereas you normally do, or maybe you're quiet in that meeting all the time, but you're going to say at least one thing that's honest about your views the next time you have that meeting. Pick one or two small-ish things and be a little more honest and real in that context. Watch how people react. Most of the time, and this is important, so I love your question, most of the time, if you're a strong performer, if people perceive you as valuable, you're not going to have a problem. You'll get away with it, no problem. And then you can take yet another small step forward towards being a little more authentic. But depending on who you are, depending on where you work, they might not enjoy that. They might see your behavior as unexpected, or they might see it as a problem, somehow a violation in their mind of a norm that we're supposed to care about at work. If that happens, well, now you're in a position to ask yourself, how much risk do I want to take in these relationships at work? And I can't answer that for you, but I can tell you, start small, because if you're able to grow it within your team, others tend to reciprocate. And that makes for a work environment that's a lot more relaxed and productive.
So take small little change to start, and then see how people react to that, right? And I'm curious about another thing. Todd, is we have culture differences everywhere, right? So in the West different than in the East, and then in your research, would that make us, would there be any culture barrier in authenticity that can really minimize the change to happen for this growing?
Sure, absolutely. You know the answer to your question. Of course you do. There are big cultural differences. It's true that certain Western societal norms have spread around the globe, but there's still large differences based on history and culture. And in the West, what I like to talk about around authenticity is fairly common sense. People tend to get it, understand it, and value it. And it's more challenging. I'll pick on Japan. More challenging there, where people have more highly prescribed roles and expectations based on age, role at work, gender, etc. No matter how anyone might feel about that, that tends to be a part of that culture. So within some of those, let's say, more defined, role-based, defined cultures, absolutely, this is a tougher thing to crack. I still think it applies. I think that the way you apply it is simply, number one, you have to be a value added. I mean, a high performer. If you're a top 20% performer, I say to you, in any culture, it's amazing what you can get away with when you're a strong performer. So that's number one. You just can't forget that. And then number two, the cautious small start is even more important in more prescribed or defined cultures. We're showing some of that. I call it humanity, and I don't want to say that in Japan, because I started picking on Japan. I don't want to say that they don't like people showing their humanity, because that's not accurate. But they love folks to stay within their lane, is the way we would say it in the States. And that's, I recognize that. I just want to tell you, and there isn't a secret answer to it, except that you need to be a strong performer.
And then why strong performance will help us to be, have an easier seat at the table, though, for authenticity?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Why strong performance will help us, give us easy access to that, though?
Businesses are inanimate objects that move around only because humans make them move around. And there's one thing above all businesses love, and that's a few performance metrics that tell everyone that the business is performing well. If you have skills that make that business perform well, I'm not saying it's the only thing, excuse me, the only thing that matters in business, because it's not, but it is a bias that a lot of leaders have. First and foremost, and I understand this and I respect this, first and foremost, they care about performance. Now, performance metrics vary group to group, company to company. But if you prove that you know how to, I'll give you an obvious example, make sales if you're a salesperson, and you can do that at the highest levels among the entire sales force, you will be given more latitude or space to be yourself without offending or worrying anyone, because they value your ability to make sales so high. That's true in any role. The better you are, the more space people give you to kind of speak your mind and be who you are. I'm not even saying that that's fair. I'm saying that it's true.
But then how can we create the environment that people at all levels within the organization can raise their voice and concerns and make their voice heard, so that everybody can be as authentic that they could be at work though?
Well, it's a great question. And in the science and in the world of organizations, there's a large push towards what's called psychological safety, which is the short answer to your question. We want a culture and climate that allows anyone to feel meaningfully comfortable to speak up, share their real, less filtered thoughts. That's the backbone of creativity and innovation, because if people don't feel comfortable, nothing interesting really happens. The reality is that organizations vary widely in terms of culture. In some places, I'll pick on LinkedIn, because I am very close with LinkedIn and I love those guys a lot. They're really progressive and very people oriented. And the idea of psychological safety doesn't have to be explained to anyone, because they get it and they live it every day. People there love working there and they speak up. And I could go on forever about them. That's one end of the spectrum. On the other end, there are many dinosaur companies still out there who believe in simple command and control structures, the simple use of hierarchy, giving orders, people doing what they're told, and no one's asking for your thoughts on anything, just do what you're told. That's the other end of the spectrum. And then there's a trillion organizations in the middle. So it's possible to take any one of them and move them forward in a more progressive cultural direction. That's true. It's hard, and the way you do it starts with having the right leadership. If you don't have, I don't care what's going on in training and human resources, or how well you're hiring great new people who believe in the idea that you just brought up, if you don't have the right leadership team modeling the way, showing the way every day in terms of interpersonal relationships, then it's not going to grow. So that is a challenge. And because of that challenge, by the way, I have a career. If everyone found it easy to establish what you just asked me about, I would not have this career. I would have to go be an accountant.
Hey, Todd, you travel the world teaching leaders and teams and organizations to equip themselves so that they can be ready to thrive in the future, right? And so in your comment just now, what is the new set of leadership skills that people need to adopt and learn and excel from now though?
Well, it's very different than it was 50 years ago for a lot of reasons. We are, thankfully, as a species, continuing to evolve. And as we do that, we're getting past a simple focus on competency. General notions, for example, IQ, which is interesting, flawed notion, but interesting notion, or a more work-based idea of competencies. Hey, we're an accounting firm. How much do you have a CPA? How much do you know about accounting stuff? We're realizing that great competence is just a foundation for someone to be successful and enter the leadership ranks. And then after you enter the leadership ranks, what got you there ain't good enough. And everything in terms of your success and ability to help the organization grow depends on a different set of skills, and they are dominated by people skills. How well can you feel empathy for others, understand what's motivating them or causing them challenges, communicate in a way that respects them and helps them push forward with their work? It's really about caring in a way that helps them grow.
Mm.
That sounds strange to some people. Hey, I'm not there to be nice. I'm there to hit my numbers. No, if you're there to properly care for people, you will be better at hitting your numbers. That's the shift in mentality that we're seeing take place.
So caring is the backbone, the foundation of everything. That if we want the shift to move forward and to sustainably running, and that is something that all leaders need to put on in their engine, right?
Absolutely.
So that leads to my question regarding to your speaking engagements. So
Mm.
I really love what you say. More is always possible, and you work, your way out to help people to realize that, and so that they can realize the best potential inside of them. And there's a lot of different philosophy in a different, part of the world saying, if we expect less, then we'll be happier, and it's go into contradiction of your way of thinking. Can you share with us what is what is the your belief in the more is always possible, and why you're doing that?
Well, again, my original interest in this whole career path I'm on was kind of applied psychology. And it turns out how we think impacts significantly how we behave and how much we excel. So when you look at an object, now there is a personality factor here. When you look at a challenge in front of you, do you say to yourself, that is a threat, that is difficult, that's going to be painful, I don't know if I can do that? Or do you choose, and it's always a choice, do you choose to say, that's going to be difficult, but I can find a path, and it's going to feel good when I do, and I'm going to do that step first, then that step, and then I'm going to laugh and yell and scream so happy when I finish it? That's a positive perspective. That's a choice. We are wired by personality to lean one way or the other. That's true. But no matter which way you lean based on your personality, you can still learn to make the choice to see a positive perspective. So when I think about your question, I think about goals and how people try to strive and become successful. And I love to tell people that every time they achieve something, the first thing they should realize after they celebrate a little bit, they should realize that if they can do that, they can probably do even more. That's basic logic, to say the least. But it's an idea that seems to be elusive, and I love reminding people of it. I once had a close friend. She was asthmatic, and she worked through that, and it was not easy, and did something that at one point in her life seemed impossible, and she actually trained for and ran a marathon. And before she trained for that marathon, the most she'd ever run, ever, was 3 miles, very slowly. Anyhow, after the marathon, she was very elated, very excited. Holy cow, I can't believe it. I'm so tired. I'm so happy. And then I said, can you imagine even more? I mean, you just did that. What else can you do? How much further can you push this?
Wow.
And it started making her think and think and think. And this was long before I got into the business that I'm in now. And that moment stuck with me, because it's important for people to adopt that mentality, because it is true. More is usually possible.
Wow. Thanks for doing that. Thanks for doing that. Because we have the choice to pick what we think, right? Now we have another choice to pick from what we think, and then increase a little bit on top of that, so we can something which were impossible before now becomes a possible. So that's amazing. And thanks for doing that. We know the past of what you wanted to become a wrestler at some point. You wanted to be, and then you went to the corporate world, and you become a professor, a dean, and then you decided to take a career into different paths to have more influence. And you wrote a lot of book, and I recently I saw that's the new book coming that you're gonna be introduced in a month or so, isn't it, Todd?
It's actually coming out in April.
Oh, April, it's already came out already.
Okay.
Oh.
No, it's coming out in April, but I'm starting to promote it already. I'm very happy to talk about it.
So April of next year or what? Alrighty. So what is Dancing with the Monster all about?
Well, it's about a version of my take on success and overcoming your fears, facing your fears and overcoming them. This is actually an important story to tell. I wrote a book. It was more like a novel length, and I confirmed, unfortunately, for like the third time in my life I've tried, that I am not a novelist. It wasn't good. I wanted to write a certain type of book where one of the characters, believe it or not, was a vampire. And the reason, a business book, and the reason is when I was younger as a business person, I remember the small, very popular book called Who Moved My Cheese? And there were a couple of mice who were main characters in that story. And that stuck with me, the use of a fable type story in business. I thought that was interesting. And so I wrote this novel with a protagonist who was a vampire. And I realized when I was done, it was not good. And I was I was thinking, what do I do now? Obviously, I'm not a novelist. I should get back to more simple business writing. And then I remembered Who Moved My Cheese and my desire to go in that direction. And I said, you know what? I'm willing to fail. I am willing to fail. I just failed. I just wrote that book and it was not good. And no one's going to care about that. And so I said, let me reimagine this and do the thing that I thought about several times over the years and write a fable type story. And so I came up with 5 characters that are monsters: a vampire, a ghost, a zombie, a werewolf, and one that I'm blanking on. Anyhow, and the main character is a vampire, and he has to really renew his confidence, which he has lost, and help a bunch of misfit monsters learn, or Mummy was the other one, and help these misfit monsters learn how to do the one thing all monsters are supposed to do, which is to scare children. And they really struggled, but eventually, as a team, they worked it out and rediscovered what it means to be a monster. And so Dancing with Monsters is about facing your fears, seeing the positive side of all the imperfections that you have, that we all have, and learning to be proud of those unique characteristics and maybe even leverage some of them to help you perform. So the book is a fun, really fun, short, fast fable that is colorful with some interesting characters and monsters. And then it ends with a long discussion session talking, as we've been talking, about the actual issues at hand in the story, from confidence to leadership behaviors that help teams discover their strengths, etc.
Wow, definitely. Vivian and I will try to order some of the books, and then if we can have some signature from you, so that we can, give it to our friends, our 3 children, so that they can face with their monster in the future and not afraid of face with their fears. That will be wonderful, because at one point in time we will fail, and then when we fail, we learn instead of fear from failure again, right?
I have to tell you, that is one of the most fascinating issues in life to me. Humans are imperfect. All of us, completely imperfect. We will fail a lot in our lives.
Yep.
Small failures, big failures. That's just inevitable. It's as normal as breathing. And yet we still hide that fact, disavow that fact, feel bad about that fact. It's very strange. It's what drives us to grow, and yet people are still so resistant.
Yep. There's 2 more questions I would like to ask you, Todd, and we always want to celebrate something great in advance, also with the friends, with the people that we invite to the show. So, is there anything that exciting you are working on and you want to share with Vivian, with me, and the audience, so that we can celebrate with you in advance?
You're very kind. I mean, the number one focus for me right now, of course, is Dancing with Monsters. Excuse me. But I'm also in the very early stages of launching a home studio, and I've just recently took video production. Because of the pandemic, a lot of places you might go do videos, like LinkedIn, shut down. And so I built a studio and have started producing videos, and I've just licensed my first couple of batches of courses to LinkedIn, and I hope to grow this little studio and produce content that helps a lot of people over the next many years. So I'm hopeful about that.
Wow, wonderful. And we wish your studios will, create a lot of great contents for the people around the world, like all the courses that you've been incorporated with LinkedIn. So, and then I was impressed with the number of more than 30 million people have, screened and learned from the course you've been created. And that is a huge impact that you already been creating. So with this, you can create more, and that's the beauty of more is always possible philosophy. Sure. And my last question for this is Vivian and I, we always love to understand how people think. Okay, and then the part of that is we see a lot of we see the trend in ability to thinking for people is not increasing but declining. And so if we can understand, if we can get some insights from our experts when they share, how they think, and we share it with our audience, and hope that we can help them to increase their ability to think. So the question is, Todd, how do you help yourself to expand your thinking?
Several interesting answers to that. I'll try and be brief, but it's a great question. I try to remind myself, situation by situation, task by task, project by project, to check my assumptions and stop assuming I know exactly how it should go, how it will go, so that I'm open to the unexpected things that will be inevitable. I always try to start by overtly mentally recognizing that reality. And then I remind myself, as we just talked about, that screwing up and failing is probable, and that's okay to wear it like a badge of honor and learn something. And the third thing I think is, don't forget, you can't hesitate to bring in people who are different and smarter than you, because they're going to help you move forward faster. So those are very common ways I start trying to think as I approach new things.
Alrighty, so challenge the assumption, and then let's just say always know that failure is okay, and then bring people in different background, create a diversity of the team, so that it can help us to expand the perspective, right? Todd, I really appreciate all the advice that you share with us. I also admire and appreciate all the works that you do, and we're really thankful for you to spending your morning on the weekend and joining our show, and sharing your story of life to our audience. And there's a lot of things that you share we've been able to learn from you, so we really appreciate that. Okay,
it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining, and we wish you a wonderful weekend. Enjoy all the malls always possible coming. Okay,
thank you.
Okay, bye bye for now.